Good morning. The first item of business this morning is general questions. Question number 1, Murdo Fraser, has not been lodged, but an explanation has been provided. So we go straight to question number 2, Duncan McNeil.
To ask the Scottish Government when the Cabinet Secretary for Justice last met the Chief Executive of the Scottish Court Service and what issues were discussed.
Cabinet Secretary Kenny McCaskill.
I meet with the Chief Executive of the Scottish Court Service regularly. The last formal meeting was on 26 March when I was given an update on SCS plans. I also met Mr McQueen informally at a Courts Reform Bill event for stakeholders held on 30th April.
Duncan McNeil.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary's response. Did the Cabinet Secretary discuss the recent progress in accessing DWP and other Whitehall Whitehall departments to pursue Scotland's 150,000 fine defaulters? And does he agree that to make real progress we need to increase the numbers of dedicated fine officers to pursue those nearly 6,000 people each that they need to pursue each year, operating sometimes with a hand behind their back and having their job made more difficult by sheriffs and fiscals who continue to impose fines on people who have already defaulted? What action will the Cabinet Secretary take to address this issue here in Scotland? Cabinet
Secretary.
Well, yes, I did discuss it at the recent informal meeting because it followed upon the indication by the DWP that they would allow the Scottish Court Service access. That I have welcomed. It will allow the Scottish Court Service to have easier access to details, not simply on benefit, but perhaps more importantly on national insurance numbers for those who would seek to default, who are in employment, and it makes them easier to discover where they are, to trace them and to take the appropriate action. That is a matter welcomed by the Scottish Court Service. I don't wish to be begrudging in the delay that's coming, and I therefore thank the DWP for, I think, what will allow matters to improve. And I can give the member an assurance that both Mr McQueen and those who work under him and fine enforcement officers will be taking the appropriate steps to move matters on. In terms of fines being imposed on those who already have a penalty imposed and have not as yet met it, these clearly are matters for judicial independence, but it is a factor that would be, should be, and I think almost certainly is taken into account by the presiding sheriff.
Thank you. Supplementary, Dave Thompson.
Yes, does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that there should be a new Justice Centre built in Dingwall to replace the Inverness and Dingwall courts, and also with Brigadier Hugh Munro that Dingwall should be considered for a replacement for the Porterfield prison, and that he thinks that may well be a good idea in terms of justice for the North?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'd first of all put on record my thanks and gratitude to Brigadier Munro for his service. He was an outstanding Inspector of Prisons, and I'd like that formally recorded. Obviously, this is for the Scottish Court Service to progress. They do have a long-term vision in Scotland that includes justice centres. The areas that are identified at the present moment include the Borders, Fife, Lanarkshire and Highland. I think there is merit in what the member suggests, and indeed Brigadier Munro has alluded to, in making sure that prisons and courts are, if not co-located, at least proximate. And I think the matters raised regarding Dingwall by the constituency MSP, I am sure, are of interest both to the Scottish Court Service but also to the Scottish Prison Service.
Briefly, Alison McInnes.
Thank you very much. Did the Cabinet Secretary discuss with the Court Service why they have reached conclusions on court closures without completing the Equality Impact Assessment? Court closures are likely to impact disproportionately on women, children and disabled as main users of public transport, because there will be much more complex journeys involved. Will the Cabinet Secretary ensure forthwith that the Equality Impact Assessment is finished?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the Equality Impact Assessment will be dealt with, but clearly matters are being dealt with by the Court Service and taking into account a variety of factors: the impact upon the court users, the impact upon those who work there, the cost of transport to alternative venues, the availability of transport. All these matters have been factored in. All are available within the documentation provided by the Court Service, and clearly the Court Service, the Procurator Fiscal Service and indeed victim support are also there to ensure that those who have difficulties, those who have worries or fears about accessing a court are able to do so, whether it's a current court or a future location that they may have to travel to.
Thank you. Question number 3, Nanette Milne.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will cap the cost of the Aberdeen Western Peripheral Route project at the current estimate.
Cabinet Secretary Nicola Sturgeon.
The Transport Minister announced earlier this week that each council's future contribution will be capped at £75 million.
Nanette Milne.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her very welcome response. I am pleased that Scottish Conservative pressure has paid off and helped to win a better deal for the North East and to protect North East taxpayers by delivering the cap that's been announced this week. Can the Minister give an assurance that North East councils will not have to fund any future maintenance costs for Aberdeen Western Peripheral Road once it's built?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, obviously the maintenance of the road network is dealt with in the normal way, and we will continue to discuss with both councils all issues relating to the Western Peripheral Route during its construction and thereafter once it's in use. I hope all members would agree that the fact that we are now able to press ahead with what is an extremely important piece of infrastructure in the North East, serving in particular Aberdeen, is a hugely positive development, and the focus now should be getting on with it and making sure that this road is available for use in Aberdeen on time and on budget.
Supplementary, Lewis MacDonald.
Thank you very much. I agree with the Cabinet Secretary. The focus should be on making progress, and given that there are within the WPR project a couple of discrete sections, one connecting the airport and the other at Balmedy Tipperty, can she give any indication of when she expects progress to be made, so that at least these discrete sections of the project will be completed and ready to use?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as Lewis MacDonald will be well aware, Balmedy to Tipperty, for example, the dualling of Balmedy to Tipperty is included in the overall NPD contract for the Western Peripheral Route. We've also given a clear commitment to carrying out improvements at Horrigan, which will be taken forward separately to the AWPR as soon as the construction of that and Balmedy Tipperty is completed. So the key point here is that we want to press ahead as quickly as is reasonably possible with the main project, with the different component parts of that, and that when that is constructed, with the much needed improvements around Horrigan roundabout as well, and we have an absolute commitment to ensuring that that whole project stays on track.
And briefly, Maureen Watt.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Given the delays that the AWPR project has already faced, does the Cabinet Secretary agree that it is irresponsible of Councillor Young of Aberdeen City Council to cynically object to the agreed funding split, and that he and his colleagues should honour the funding agreement made in 2003 and allow this vital infrastructure project to be progressed in the spirit of cooperation, as Aberdeenshire Council has done?
Nicola Sturgeon. Yes, I do. I absolutely and thoroughly agree with that. As I said in my response to Nanette Milne, the people of the North East have frankly waited long enough for this project. It's time to stop arguing over these matters and have an absolute focus, as the Scottish Government does, on working together to get this project delivered without further delays. That's the priority, and anybody who seeks to divert from that is not doing justice to the people of Aberdeen.
Thank you. Question number 4, Ken Macintosh.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government how it supports bus services.
Cabinet Secretary Nicola Sturgeon.
The Scottish Government's commitment to supporting bus services is clearly demonstrated by the £250 million invested every year in Bus Service Operators Grant, concessionary fares reimbursement, the Scottish Green Bus Fund and the Bus Investment Fund.
Ken Macintosh.
The Cabinet Secretary, I'm sure, will be aware of the bus reorganisation taking place by First in Glasgow and the surrounding area. Will she be aware of the impact this is having on many vital services which are now being cut off to communities in places like East Renfrewshire? The motivation behind First seems to be clearly to prioritise only those services which make a profit and abandoning the rest. So can the Minister tell me whether she now believes it's time for tougher regulation, and will she give her support and the Government's support to the Members' Bill being introduced by my colleague Ian Gray?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, firstly, can I reiterate the scale of the financial support that the Scottish Government gives to the provision of bus services around the country, and I would hope that members on all sides of the chamber would welcome that. Secondly, I am very aware of bus issues around particularly Glasgow, where my own constituency is, and I know Ken Macintosh will be as involved as I am in his constituency in these discussions. Therefore, I do appreciate the understandable concern that there is amongst the public if there are any proposals to change bus services that they depend on. We will study very carefully the proposals that come forward from Ian Gray, and I think it's important that we do that in the right spirit. I think it is important, though, to point out that right now local authorities do have the ability to contract for services to meet social needs. Local authorities can enter into agreements with operators for quality partnerships or statutory quality contracts. So there are powers there for local authorities, and of course the key responsibility in ensuring that bus provision across their areas meets the needs of the populations they serve lie with them. But we will continue to be as constructive as we can with anybody bringing forward proposals about how bus services across the country can be even further improved.
Thank you. Question number 5, Marco Biagi.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to tackle air pollution in cities.
Minister Paul Wheelhouse.
The Scottish Government is working closely with local authorities, SEPA and other partners to improve air quality in cities. We support a number of measures, both local and national, to successfully tackle air pollution, and these include the establishment of a statutory framework and clear strategic aims for both air quality and transport, providing grant funding for local authority actions and providing advice and information through the Scottish Air Quality website and Scotland's Environment Web.
Marco Biagi.
The Minister will be aware that under the statutory framework, additional areas in central Edinburgh have been designated as air quality management areas because they no longer meet the standards. Specifically, what support can Edinburgh, as a local authority, but also as a citizens, expect from the Scottish Government in addressing this problem?
Minister.
I certainly am aware of Marco Biagi's point about Great Junction Street, Inverleith Row and indeed Glasgow Road and Corstorphine have been added as air quality management areas. We are committed to improving air quality across the country, and we have seen significant reductions in pollution emissions over recent decades through tighter industrial regulation, also through improved fuel quality, cleaner vehicles and increased focus on sustainable transport. But City of Edinburgh Council has produced a comprehensive air quality action plan and is working to implement it with support from Scottish Government and others, and is required to report annually on progress with implementation. In particular, the Scottish Government has provided financial support for air quality monitoring and specific actions to support these plans. But in addition, through the Future Transport Fund and other measures, we aim to reduce the impact of transport on our environment, and this will support a range of initiatives around sustainable transport, including cycling infrastructure and low-carbon vehicle technology. And as the Cabinet Secretary, Deputy First Minister, as was mentioned already, the Scottish Green Bus Fund will also support transition to low-carbon public transport.
Thank you. Briefly, Jimmy McGregor.
Thank you. Does the Minister believe that the planting of trees in city areas and around about cities can help mitigate the levels of some of the pollutants?
Minister.
Absolutely, and I would certainly praise the work that is being done by Edinburgh and neighbouring authorities, including Fife, to plant 500,000 trees in the Lothian and Fife area as a means by which they can combat emissions. I certainly recognise the important role that tree planting in urban areas can play in that regard.
Thank you. And the question number 6, Kezia Dugdale.
To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on comments by the chairman of the Yes Scotland campaign that a separate Scottish currency would give more flexibility, more freedom and a wider range of economic levers than its plans for a currency union.
Cabinet Secretary Nicola Sturgeon.
Scottish ministers have made clear our intention to retain the pound. The first report of the Fiscal Commission Working Group, a group of renowned experts, including 2 Nobel laureates, Professors Joe Stiglitz and Jim Mirrlees, proposes a macroeconomic framework which retains the pound and gives the Scottish Government maximum economic policy flexibility. And of course, it should be remembered that control over economic policy only comes with independence. Given Scotland's contribution to the sterling area, it will be in the overwhelming interests of the UK post-referendum to agree to continued shared use of the pound. In the words of Alistair Darling, presiding officer, if Scotland is independent, a currency union is logical and desirable.
Kezia Dugdale.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I note the Cabinet Secretary has chosen to ignore Dennis Canavan's remarks because we all know that she's dancing on the head of a pin here. Given that her current currency policy is in complete disarray, is she surprised by today's poll, which shows support for independence at its lowest point since the Yes campaign launched?
Cabinet Secretary. I'm surprised that Kezia Dugdale accuses me of ignoring Dennis Canavan, which I never do. Labour is the party that managed to lose Dennis Canavan from their own ranks and go on to lose the seat that he held. Let me explain, for the benefit of Kezia Dugdale and her colleagues, what will happen in the referendum. People will vote on the propositions in the White Paper that will be published by the Government in the autumn of this year. Now, as in any democracy, parties in elections thereafter will be entirely free to argue their own position. And of course, if they gain sufficient support, something Labour has struggled with in recent elections, then they will get elected and have the ability to implement their own policies. But the proposition at the heart of Kezia Dugdale's question is absolutely absurd. You know, she is saying that there must be complete policy agreement between different parts of the Yes campaign. Does that mean that she agrees with her Tory partners in the No campaign about economic policy, welfare cuts, bringing the UK out of the European Union? I think we need to be told. Presiding Officer, the big benefit of independence is that the ability to determine our own policy direction comes here to this Parliament, instead of being left in the hands of a Westminster government that all too often we don't vote for.
Question number 7, Jamie Hepburn.
To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to OK Electric's plans to reduce the size of its workforce at its Cumbernauld plant by around half.
Minister Derek Mackay.
We share the member's concern following the announcement by OK about its Cumbernauld operation. It is an anxious time for the employees affected and their families, and this Government will continue to do everything we can to help establish the most positive outcome. The Cabinet Secretary for Finance and Sustainable Growth met with OK management team shortly after the announcement to begin to establish what can be done in this respect. Mr Swinney is visiting Japan this week and will meet with the President and CEO of OK Data to discuss a range of issues further. We are also maintaining close contact with the company through our PACE initiative, which stands ready to provide a tailored package of help and support for any employees who may be facing redundancy.
Jamie Hepburn.
I thank the Minister for that answer. When I met representatives of the workforce at OK, they made the point that many of the workers there have only ever had that one job at OK, and have only ever had one interview. Can the Minister set out what specific support might be available to help those who are made redundant in those circumstances be able to re-enter employment, and can he also set out what support there might be from the Scottish Government to ensure OK remain in Cumbernauld for time to come?
Minister.
The Scottish Government will explore the reasoning behind their apparent decisions to work to ensure that there are little job losses as possible. Our agencies are working on this as we speak. If job losses cannot be avoided, our PACE initiative, led by SDS, will engage to ensure that a tailored package of support is available, recognising the points that the member has raised, to ensure that there is a comprehensive package that will support those who are affected should their redundancies be fulfilled.
Thank you. Question number 8 has not been lodged, but an explanation has been provided. Therefore, I turn to question number 9. Colin Keir.
To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had with the UK Government regarding devolving air passenger duty.
Cabinet Secretary Nicola Sturgeon.
The UK Government is very well aware of the Scottish Government's position on devolving air passenger duty, and we continue to make the strong case for the devolution of air passenger duty as soon as possible, so that we can develop a regime that makes Scotland more competitive.
Colin Keir.
Given recent reports, does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that APD causes enormous damage to competitiveness, investment, connectivity and business opportunities, something that, given events such as the Ryder Cup and Commonwealth Games coming to Scotland, we can do without?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, I do very much agree with that, and the report that was published in February of this year, the economic impact of air passenger duty, underlined the damage that APD is doing to our airports, to our tourism industry and to the economy. Scotland will welcome the world in 2014 courtesy of homecoming, the Commonwealth Games and the Ryder Cup, yet we are in the absolutely absurd situation of increasing costs for people who want to visit Scotland. We believe that the devolution of air passenger duty would enable the development of a regime that supports more direct international air routes, reduces the cost of flights for passengers and encourages more visitors. And it's a good example of how we need the powers in the hands of this Parliament to do what is right for Scotland.
A very brief supplementary and a brief answer, please, Gavin Brown.
Thank you. The Scottish Government want APD devolved. Is there a formal commitment or policy to reduce it?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, if Gavin Brown had been at the speech I made at Renfrewshire Chambers of Commerce yesterday, he would have heard that question both asked and answered. We want this power for a purpose, so that we can do something about APD, which means reducing it or abolishing it completely, so that there is a competitive situation in Scotland. That's our position. It would do Gavin Brown more good if he argued the case with his UK Government colleagues for the devolution of the tax to Scotland, so that we could do something about it.
Thank you. That ends general questions, and it brings us to our next item of business.